Nell Wulfhart is a decision coach. She helps people make big decisions in a single session, getting them out of endless deliberation and into action. She's been doing this for 10 years and has helped everyone from parents and poets to hedge fund managers and Olympic athletes. You can find her at decideandmoveforward.com. Nell, welcome to Hustle and Grace.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. We'll dive into all the decision making stuff, but before we do that, I'm just so curious and interested in your backstory because I think I don't know if it was while you've been doing the decision making coaching work or if it was before that, but you've been a writer. You've been published in like Condé Nast and the New York Times. Could you just give us like the 30,000 foot view of your career journey so far?
Sure, of course. Well, first of all, I'm from Philadelphia, but I've been living abroad since since I graduated high school. So more than 20 years.
Okay.
And I kind of like segged naturally into travel writing after a few years of living in Vietnam. It was just something like there weren't a lot of English speaking journalists there. There was an opportunity to pick up work. So I was like, okay, I've always been a good writer. Let me go for it. So I tried that out and yeah, it kind of like grew it slowly. I had different jobs, like full-time jobs or part-time jobs doing the travel writing on the side. And then eventually I was living in Seoul in Korea and I was working at some website doing like editorial stuff. And I got my first yes from the New York Times. And then I was like, that's it. I'm getting out of like real jobs and into like full-time freelancing. So I still do a little bit of it now. The pandemic kind of put paid to a lot of travel writing for obvious reasons.
Sure.
But I've been doing that like as my full-time work, freelancing for a bunch of different publications, about different things, mostly about travel. And then, yeah, and I published a book this year. So I worked on that for a few years. So
that
writing
was this year.
No, it was last year. What year are we in? It was in 2022.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yes. It's a nonfiction book about flight attendants. It's about stewardesses in the 1960s and 70s and the true story of how they basically turned the most sexist workplace in America, the airline cabin, into a place where they could actually be treated as human beings. And in the process, they secured all these rights for working women in America along the way. We just don't know about it.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I hope that turns into a movie. Fingers crossed.
Me too.
That'd be great. Okay, so you've been doing travel writing. You've been living all around the world, and you published a book, and you've been doing coaching. So tell us a little bit about the coaching.
Yeah, it's something that I'm a big fan of multiple income streams to begin with. Like, I just love the idea of, not relying on one source for your income, especially if you're an employee, because, you could, in a country with at-will employment, you could lose that job at any time and you have no recourse. And so I'm always like working on a bunch of things at once. I also just find that really fun and more interesting.
Same.
And I like to do new things. Yeah, it's just I don't know, it's just more interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess I've like always been the person that friends and family came to for advice, but like not just feel good advice, like straightforward, no nonsense advice. Like I just have that fixer brain where somebody tells you about a problem, it's like, okay, this is how you solve it. Like,
yeah,
I can't help it. I've stopped apologizing for it. I'm just leaning into it.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. And then one of my friends pointed out, probably because I gave her some unasked for advice, she was like, maybe you could make this into a business. And I thought, okay, let's try it. I put up a website and I started telling people about it and I started building some clients from there. And yeah, I've been doing it now as like part of my, portfolio career for a decade. It's kind of amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And all the while you've lived in different places all around the world. So you mentioned Vietnam and now you're in Uruguay.
Yes. I've been here for 8 years.
Okay. That sounds almost like home. Do you feel like you're at home?
I recently realized it's the longest I've lived anywhere since high school, which seems amazing.
Wow.
Like, it's not like Uruguay's on it's a great place, but it is not on anyone's like top 10 places I'm dying to move to, right? It's not
Yeah.
like Paris or,
Yeah. Yeah.
Buenos
Yeah.
Aires or something like that.
Wow.
But it's great. It's a wonderful country. It's really small. It's very progressive. The steak is amazing. They have
I love that.
cattle is what they produce mostly here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask, like, could you give us a quick rundown of like where all you have lived over the course of your 20 years around the world?
Sure. Well, I went to college in Dublin in Ireland, and then I went back and did a master's degree there. I lived in Vietnam for almost 5 years. I lived in Korea for more than a year. I lived in Israel for a while. I lived in Sri Lanka for like 4 months.
Wow.
And every once in a while I'd come back to Philly for like 6 months or a year. And yeah, and then I came to Uruguay.
Wow. So you don't have like a favorite continent or hemisphere or anything. You're like open.
I mean, honestly, Asia still kind of feels like home to me because I lived there for so long and I just find it like this most wonderful place in the world. But yeah, I mean, I like to move around and to be
Yeah.
in different places. So that's been
And
great.
and all the while, most of your writing clients were US based or a
Yeah,
mix.
like travel magazines based in the US, like Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, New York Times travel section. Yeah, like almost, sometimes I write for some place in the UK or Australia, but almost all US based for sure.
Got it. Okay. So you're still a writer and you do decision making coaching. So give us like let's start at like point A. Why should we get better at decision making?
I have a lot to say about this.
Take your time.
First of all, I did not realize how bad so many people were at decision making before I started helping them to get better at it. And then I just realized that like this is something people struggle with all the time on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, and that some people are stuck on like one big decision for weeks or months or years. I've coached people who have been trying to make up their mind on one thing for years.
Mm.
So to me, this is just like, okay, it comes naturally. And I have this ability to sort of like see through to the heart of the problem and pull out the answer. But when I realized that was not universal, I could just see how much time was being sucked away in decision-making. And I will just say, like, the secret of decision-making is that after a certain point, more hours spent trying to make the decision does not have any effect on the quality of the decision itself. And that most people should be spending much less time making decisions and much more time acting on those decisions, and their lives would like improve immediately. So I would say that not only is it a huge time suck, it is a huge energy suck. And like a lot of people have a decision, that they wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and they're thinking about it, or they're in the shower and they're thinking about it, or every time they have dinner with their partner, they're talking about it.
Yeah.
And it just takes over their lives.
Yeah.
And to me, it just feels like it's such a waste.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I remember I'm blanking on her name, the author of the book Wild. She has like an advice column. Are you familiar
Cheryl
with this?
Strayed, yeah.
Thank you. She said once that when people write to her, they know what they want to do. They kind of just want permission to do it. Do you find that?
They know what they want to do, but they don't always know that they know it.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So
yeah.
I will coach people on decisions like, do I want to get a divorce, or do I want to move to a new city, or do I want to take this job? And like the answer is inside them. Like my job is basically to pull it out. And sometimes it is that like they know what they want to do, but other people have told them it's a bad decision, or they just want somebody to like check their work and make sure that the decision they're making like actually makes sense. And I'm like a totally neutral third party. I have like no investment in what it is that they decide to do. I have no bias. My feelings will not be hurt, if they don't take my advice. So it's not like talking to a friend or a family member or a spouse or something. It's just like from a completely neutral perspective, I can look at your decision, why you made it, and tell you like, yes, here's your permission slip, go do it.
Right. And I'm guessing that for some people, there is like what they view as the safe, responsible decision. And then there's like the crazy, bigger life decision. And so do they come to you with like literally all the facts and details, like, here's how much debt I have, and here's this. And like, do you get them to bring you all of that information?
Oh yeah, we get
Yeah.
into it. Like
Yeah.
especially like a big decision, like it really, or even a decision like changing jobs, which is not in the greater scheme of things huge, but it affects every part of your life. So it's like, I always ask, we talk about finances, we talk about savings and debt, we talk about kids, we talk about, do you want to have kids in the future? We could do like a real 360-degree view of their life, just to make sure that the decision we're making like is going to get them where they want to get to go,
Yeah.
and not, hinder them in that goal. So, but
Yeah.
it involves every aspect of the life.
You like
for
turn
sure.
over every stone as you're going.
Yeah, it's a lot of personal questions, but it's like, it can be anonymous, and I just do the calls on audio, so it's not even face to face. So I think it feels safe and secure, and like they can tell me all about their affairs and their, divorces and their whatever.
Well, I recently, really just for the first time, I started counseling like about a month ago. And I was like, oh, how refreshing to just have this person who like doesn't have a dog in this hunt. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
To be able to just tell all the things and know, like, ethically, like, she cannot and will not be telling anyone. Like, it's kind of nice to just dump it on someone.
I absolutely, that's part of the reason people reach out to me. It's just like, I am not connected to them at all. They can just make the decision sort of like in a sort of safe space, and then they can go and take action on the decision. But like, it's not, honestly, people tell their friends and family too much. Like, I think it's a lot of times you could tell somebody when you've made the decision, but telling them about, your struggles to make the decision invites a lot of uninformed opinions and biases that don't really help.
Yes, absolutely. So why do you think that people struggle with decision making? Like, what, from your, educated perspective, what's really holding us back?
Fear of regret. Regret makes us feel bad, and we don't want to feel bad. And we are terrified of making the wrong decision and then looking back and feeling regret. Honestly, this is what it comes down to. But one thing that I find to be helpful, actually, a client told me this, is like, a lot of times when you're deciding between two choices, you're going to regret it either way. You're between those two choices because both of them have good and some of them bad. Yeah, exactly. There's something to lose no matter what you choose. So like, if you can get comfortable with the idea that there's going to be a little regret no matter what, I think it becomes easier to take action.
Yeah.
But I also think people are not good at separating the act of making the decision from the outcome of the decision, because we can only really control like one of those things. When somebody comes to me, we make a decision based on all the information that we have at the moment, and their values and their future and all those things. So we make the best decision possible because we can't predict the future. And then sometimes, like once in a while, like the outcome of the decision is like, oh, the job didn't work out because who knew that their new boss was going to be a terrible micromanager or whatever. Like, but the decision was a good one, but the outcome was not ideal. But people conflate those two things all the time when they're making their own decisions. And when the outcome turns out badly, they're like, oh no, I made a bad decision, and they beat themselves up and all this stuff. But like, we can't predict the future. We're literally just taking our best guess.
Right. You only know what you know. That's actually like, I don't know, that too is like a good permission slip. Like, it's okay. Like, just step forward, right? Just move forward and make a decision one way or the other.
Yes. I would also say to people in general that the way we make good decisions is definitely not by like sitting at home wondering if these decisions are good or wondering if we're going to like this thing or not like this thing. It's by doing the thing, and then we actually know, like we actually find out, we have real tangible data. So if there's any way, if you're stuck in a big decision, if there's any way at all to like test out those options, to give them a trial run, like you should just do that. And if it works out, great, double down. Right. And if it doesn't work out, okay, at least now you know that that's not for you and you can pivot and do something else. But you haven't spent like 6 months wondering only to try something and find out you don't like it.
Because time is finite. Like, it's important to just to make a decision and move forward. How can we get better at decision making? Like, what would you say is like the first thing that we should consider?
I always have this recommendation for people that they don't like, but it's very helpful, which is think about the amount of time you need to make a decision. Whatever decision it is, maybe like apply for a new job or break up with your partner or like what dress you're going to wear to that wedding reception on Friday. It doesn't matter. Think about the amount of time you think you need to make the decision and cut it in half and give yourself that deadline. And like the decision has to get made by that time. And then you take action on it. Like, and if you need an accountability buddy or you need some kind of like outside support, like, okay, whatever works for you, go ahead and set that up. But literally half the time, because people are spending way too long making decisions when they don't, as you know, as you said, have all the information, like they only know what they know, and more time spent ruminating and debating. It's just time down the drain. So I would say to get better and more efficient at decision-making, take that time, cut it in half. But
yeah.
It's scary to hear that. I know.
Yeah. Well, I consider myself a fairly decisive person. And I think one thing that I take solace in is in most decisions that you make in life, you can always give it a try and pivot if you need to. You know, not every decision, like I'm a believer in like, you know, marriage for life and like different things.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of things, like I can remember when I was trying to choose a college, I was like, oh my gosh, how can I, like, this one has these benefits and this has these benefits and these perks or whatever. And then I was like, you know what, like worst case scenario, I can go to one for a year and I can transfer. Right.
Exactly, Hilary. Like I tell people that all the time, like in 99% of cases, you can change your mind. Like, okay, it might not be the easiest thing. It might not be the most convenient thing, but there's a way to change your mind. There's a way to do something else. But I think when we've been thinking about a decision, especially for kind of a long time, it takes on so much import and so much weight that we really feel, that's why people feel trapped. Yeah. Because like, they're like, I'm going to make this decision. Like my whole life will be set around this decision. But not really though. You know, most of the time you can make a change. I mean, almost all the time. Yeah.
And do you have a hypothesis on like why sometimes we're more comfortable living in the phase of paralysis? Like why are we the way that we are?
Humans just have this tendency towards stasis, you know, like the familiar, the same, the comfortable, like we just always, there's like scientific explanations for this, like why we always prefer those kinds of situations. I do think that there becomes a point when the decision that's whirring around in your brain becomes so annoying, like it makes you so uncomfortable that then it finally forces you to take action because you can't ignore it anymore. Yeah. But I don't know. I wish I could figure that out, why we are so reluctant to take action and like start moving on it. Because I really think it's like, it just holds so many people back. And, you know, you, like I said, you can just waste so much of your life like procrastinating on making a decision.
Absolutely. Sometimes that's a more comfortable place to live in when the future is scary. One thing that I love is your website URL is decideandmoveforward.com. So I just love that because it's like, we don't need to just feel anxious about the decision because there's something on the other side of it, which is like getting to move on with your life, move forward in a specific, an intentional direction. So bravo. I love that. Like your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I love the move forward part because it's the opposite of being stuck, right? Like when people call me, they are stuck. They can't move forward. They can't make a decision. And like my whole thing is getting people to take action. I am like obsessed with this in all areas of my life, probably like to the point where my friends and family are like, stop telling us what to do. Yeah, we get it. Exactly.
Like we're not going to complain to her because she's going to tell us how it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like I said, taking action in almost every situation gives you real tangible data, like gives you real information that you can then make a better decision based on that information. And taking action is just so important. And that for so many people who feel stuck, you know, making the decision also is the hard part. And then figuring out what to do next is also hard. So I always tend to, when I do my calls with people, I always we make the decision and then we outline like what they're going to do when they get off the phone. Like, what are the next steps that they're going to take? So I don't want someone to make a decision and then get off the phone and be like, well, I'm just going to sit here for another 3 months and think about it. Like, no, step 1, step 2, step 3, like out of the quicksand of indecision and into action is so important.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny. I just identified as like a decisive person, but I think sometimes there can be the other side of that coin is sometimes I feel like I maybe moved too fast and I haven't given whatever it is that I'm going to do a really good strategic think, like, especially maybe when it comes to like work or creative projects. I'm just like, I'm going to make this thing. And I need to sort of slow down a little bit on the front end and be a little bit more methodical about it.
Yeah.
Have you found people doing that with you?
I mean, I do it myself. I know
Yeah. Okay.
exactly what you mean because as soon as I have an idea, I start taking action on it because I'm like, I'm excited and I want to like move things forward. And I don't like thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking because I feel like then sometimes I just like never move on it. So
Yeah.
my default is to have the idea or like send the pitch and start working on it and start building the thing.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out, like, okay, it doesn't work out. I will say that there have been some points where I've moved too fast and like, build out an idea that wasn't ready yet, or like sent out a pitch that wasn't fully formed because I just wanted to get it out the door and like take that action.
Yeah.
So I totally see that as a problem. But I will say that like it is a much, much smaller percentage of the population who does that than the percentage of the population that's like, well, I'm just going to think about it for a while. And then like way too much time goes by.
Yeah.
So I would say in the aggregate, taking fast, decisive action all the time is going to make your life so much better. Even if sometimes you work on something, it doesn't work out, or you send an email you shouldn't have sent. Like in the aggregate, that attitude is you just get so much more done.
Yeah.
And you feel like, there's a lot of irons in the fire at every point. Than like taking time to really deliberate and think through everything before taking action.
Yeah. So when you were sort of putting together your I guess, book proposal before you wrote the book on flight attendant stewardess, that whole sort of history, was there a part of you that was like, this is going to be a big time investment? Like, am I sure like future me wants to be in this world for so long? Like, did you have any decision-making nervousness around that?
That's such a good question. I would say that I definitely started pursuing it without thinking too much about like the long-term time commitment, because when you're writing a nonfiction book, first of all, you have to write a proposal, which is like maybe 40 or 50 pages. You have to do a lot of research. Like you take a lot of notes. It's really time consuming. So, and then, maybe you can't find an agent, or maybe the proposal doesn't sell. Like there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. You're not making a commitment upfront to like spending 2 years of your life on a book. Like you're just kind of testing the waters. And I love testing the waters. Like I just love coming up with an idea and seeing if anyone's interested and like, sending out some emails, whatever. So I didn't think about that, but it's also the sort of thing where it's like in the 6-month period of time it takes to work on a proposal and to build it up and to have your agent make edits or whatever, like there's plenty of time to be like, you know what? I don't want to spend more time on this. Yeah. So that was the kind of project where they're like, there's a million places you could drop out along the way.
Yeah.
But for me, it was new. I hadn't written like a, nonfiction book before. So that's like always going to be interesting to me and always something I'm going to be willing to try.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that you didn't experience regret about that.
No, definitely not.
Varied and interesting career. Well, Nell, this has been so much fun. Tell our listeners where they can connect with you online.
Sure. You can find me at decideandmoveforward.com. I don't really do social. It's like, it's not my thing, but you can always find me at decideandmoveforward.com.
Decideandmoveforward.com. All right. Nell, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Hilary. This was fun.